Take a seat. So, were you nervous?
True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses. Not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell.
How then am I mad? Then observe healthily how I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold, I had no desire.
I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this.
Well, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded.
With what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the week before I killed him.
And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. I could see him as he lay upon his bed.
Would a madman have been so wise as this? I took my lantern and approached the old man in his sleep. I approached the lantern cautiously, oh so cautiously to his vulture eye, and this I did for 7 long nights, every night, just at midnight.
But the eye was always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door.
A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. Perhaps he heard me laugh, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled.
Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was pitch black, with thick darkness. Who's there?
The old man had sprung up from his bed. I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening.
When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down,
I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye.
it was open, wide open.
And I grew furious as I gazed upon it.
I saw it with perfect distinctness.
All a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it, that chilled me to the very marrow in my bones.
But I could see nothing of the old man's face or person.
And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but an over-acuteness of the senses?
Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. His heart grew quicker and quicker.
And louder, every instant.
The old man's terror must have been extreme.
It grew louder, I say louder, every minute.
Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am.
But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me.
The sound would be heard by a neighbour.
The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him, and then smiled gaily. to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beats on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead.
There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body.
I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scandlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood, spot, whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. There came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbour during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. For what had I to fear?
I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues.
While I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct.
It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and became more defined, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears.
No doubt, I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased.
And yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased.
Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men. But the noise steadily increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard it not? Almighty God, no. No, they heard. They suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This, I thought, and this, I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could not bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark! Louder, louder, louder and louder. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad?